Daniela, Juanita Bermúdez, Carolina, Puerto Rico, Real de
Okay, we'll start with this with a report out of the Sydney Morning Herald over there in the land down under. The 10 million vowed to ensure that Tszyu fights for a world title in Australia. Apparently, Tszyu's camp is prepared to stump up the estimated 10 million that will be required to bring a world title fight to Australia. Promoter George Rose declaring, "We have to make it happen." Tszyu underscored his billing as the face of Australian boxing with a fifth-round technical knockout victory over Irishman Hennis Dogan at a sold-out Newcastle Entertainment Centre on Wednesday night. Now that his undefeated record has extended to 18 fights, he is poised to become the mandatory challenger for the champions in the super welterweight division. George Rose was quoted as saying, "The way I see it, the world title has to be out here in Australia. That's the situation, and that's what we need to come up with to make it happen. We want the world title, and we want it in Australia." Whether it's Charlo or Castaño, they are the targets. Timmy has to fight for a world title here in Australia, especially given the times we're in with COVID-19. Australia is the best location for it.
Do these fights happen?
No.
Would $10 million be enough to entice either Jermell Charlo or Brian Castaño to go down to the land down under?
No.
And here's why. Jermell Charlo, the unified junior middleweight champion of the world, the consensus number one and Ring Magazine lineal champion at 154 pounds. He'd likely look at a $10 million offer and call it small potatoes. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the offer being small potatoes, but that's the attitude that you get from these guys. Let me tell you something. Tszyu has more of a buzz in the land down under than Jermell Charlo has here in America. And in spite of America being a bigger boxing market than Australia,
Jamel ain't buzzing up here the way Tim is buzzing down there.
there's this illusion that because there's more population density in the United States, that equates to more stardom, more star power. You know, here in the United States, you got something like 328 million people, whereas down there in Australia, you have 13 times less that number. Just about 25 million, around there?
Around there.
So you would think that, well, in a place as big and as densely populated as the United States, that would yield out more superstars, more celebrity, when it's the opposite of that. It's that much harder to stand out because there are that many more people. Jermell Charlo is not buzzing in America in spite of how accomplished he is. But he's not buzzing in America.
The same way Tim's buzzing in Australia.
And that's not a knock on Jermell, it's just the truth. Jermell Charlo is not the face of boxing in America, but in the land down under, in Australia, Tszyu is the face of boxing. He's playing to very big crowds.
Bigger than Mel.
That was evident last year during COVID times. Something like, 15, 16,000 people just to see him fight Jeff Horn? Big numbers for a Bowen Morgan fight? Hey, listen, you could put Bowen Morgan on a plane, fly him here stateside, throw him in the ring with Jermell Charlo. It won't get you the reaction with Jermell Charlo that it got with Tszyu. It's the same thing that's going on with Ryota Murata in the middleweight division and Jermall Charlo, Big Charlo, quote unquote. Comparatively, Ryota Murata is a much bigger star in his native Japan than Jermall Charlo is here in the United States. And that's not a knock on anybody, that's just the case. It is what it is. I think a lot of Americans have trouble accepting this. They still think it's the 80s and the United States is the center of the world, the center of the universe.
I don't know, there's this perception.
If you ask me whether or not $10 million would be enough to get Jermell Charlo on a plane to fly to Australia to take on Tszyu in defense of all his world titles and the Ring Magazine belt. If you ask me whether or not $10 million gets the fight done, I dare say no. And it's not because Jermell Charlo's over here in America swimming in money. I mean, look at the numbers for the Charlo doubleheader, the pay-per-view he was just in. Wasn't nothing to write home about. They couldn't even crack 150,000 with that thing.
I don't think he's the kind of guy that gets 10 million a fight.
Not based on those paltry numbers. That being said, I don't think Jermell Charlo's getting 5, 6, 7, 10 million a fight. No way. But I think he would reject this proposition because of vanity. As an American, he likely feels that this is the place to be. This is where it's at, even if it isn't.
Tszyu isn't as mandatory anyway.
That's the other thing. Affording Tszyu a title shot is not Jermell Charlo's responsibility. It's not his problem. It's more Brian Castaño's problem, the reigning WBO champion, than it's Jermell. Now, when it comes to Brian Castaño, he makes even less, far less, than Jermell. When Golden Boy Promotions secured the rights by winning the purse bid to Teixeira versus Castaño, which went the purse bid a long time ago, the winning bid was just about $400,000, a little over $400,000. Tom Brown of the PBC, he tried to put a bid in. He tried to, secure the fight with something like $200,000.
A little over.
A $200,000 bid, just a little over. The reigning champion, Patrick Teixeira, at that time, he didn't even make $1 million off of that fight, let alone Brian Castaño. Now that Brian Castaño is a champion, I'd wager that he's going to get a pay increase, but nothing to the tune of $10 million.
The Australians could offer him a career-high payday.
They are fully capable of offering Brian Castaño a career-high purse, and for what it's worth, I actually think that Brian Castaño and his team might be a little bit more receptive to that proposition than Jermell Charlo. And Brian Castaño is Argentinian.
Not American.
But he doesn't fight primarily out of Argentina. He's used to fighting on the road. He's used to fighting on foreign soil. So for what it's worth, I actually think Brian and his team might be a little bit more receptive to such an offer than Jermell Charlo. The problem is that Brian's a PBC fighter. The other problem is Brian's looking at unifying with Jermell Charlo, which I can't complain about.
That's for the undisputed junior middleweight championship.
It's not set in stone that Tszyu will get the opportunity to take on Brian Castaño next. So unfortunately for Tim, I think he's going to have to wait.
Tim's got a better shot at fighting for a title at middleweight than junior middleweight.
I don't see either Jermell or Brian getting their passport out to fly to Australia to take on Tszyu. I don't see it happening. Not in the near future.
Shut the fuck up, you cunt!
Just had some big news, 3 or 4 big offers on the table. Interest from Saudi Arabia, my gypsy brothers in Qatar, Uzbekistan, Russia, America, England. There's some big offers on the table. I'm going to go through them on Sunday. And hopefully we get this big fight on and let me smash this big dosser. A big useless dosser, let me say. Because when I get him, I'm going to give him that. Yeah, big dosser.
Well, Tyson Fury's tune certainly has changed from a wavering commitment to the fight, a wavering commitment to seeing things through, a wavering commitment to something a lot more encouraging.
How do you reconcile it?
How do you make it make sense? How can one explain why it is that all of a sudden Tyson Fury seems a lot more optimistic about the fight when not that long ago it was both Tyson Fury and Big John Fury that were casting all of the doubts over the fight? I mean, not even Bob Arum, not even Frank Warren, not really.
They weren't being anywhere near as negative.
Not even Bob and Frank were being as pessimistic as Tyson and Big John. So what changed? What happened? Well, Eddie Hearn delivered on a deadline, like he said he would. He said, this coming weekend...
This weekend, he'd show him what's on the table.
Eddie Hearn specified that there are 3 or 4 potential locations, 3 or 4 offers on the table here and now, and he would make those offers available to both teams to allow them to decide which location they like the best. The question is, if Eddie Hearn let this be known a few days ago, why have both Tyson Fury and Big John Fury been bitching and moaning and peeing and shitting and complaining the whole time? Why have they made things so difficult in the days leading up to this news?
Why are they making things harder than they need to be?
Anxiety would be my guess. Anxiety while they wait for Eddie Hearn to get the deal done. You have to understand something. Neither Frank Warren or Bob Arum are the ones doing the legwork here. Tyson Fury might have 2 transatlantic promoters, but even those 2 transatlantic promoters are relying on Eddie to get the job done. I don't know, maybe Tyson Fury's on the phone with those guys.
He calls them.
Looking for answers, and when they can't give him any answers because they're waiting on Eddie the same way that Tyson is waiting on Eddie,
Gets pissed.
he becomes impatient, he becomes anxious, and he sees how much time he's already spent away from the ring, the fact that he hasn't fought since February of last year, and he starts telling himself maybe
this fight don't happen.
I've already been away from the ring for a year. How much longer is this going to take?
Perhaps that explains all the complaining we've been seeing.
This is cause for celebration. The tone has quickly gone from somber to celebratory with Tyson Fury and this fight. And it is cause for celebration, though we do have to characterize this
Mood swing?
whatever you want to call it, because not that long ago it was Tyson Fury himself taking to his own social media to remind everyone of the time constraint, the time frame left on the contract which he and Anthony Joshua signed. And that if the fight fans in the last couple of days have been feeling like, you know what, maybe this fight don't happen, well, that's because of Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury and Big John Fury cast that air of doubt over the fight.
Nobody else.
And no one more than them. That bit of news was misappropriated by the usual suspects who sought to misappropriate those quotes from Tyson Fury, from Big John Fury, to feed their own narrative, to insinuate that somehow it's Deontay Wilder and his legal team at work here, that they're blocking the Joshua versus Fury fight when Tyson Fury and Big John Fury let you know what the holdup is. You know, but that's just more of the same from those guys. That's just more of the same from those people. They're not in the business of information. They're in the business of clickbait and misinformation. And we know what their motivations are. They've made a pretty penny or two misinforming a lot of people who want to believe those narratives.
No matter how many times they fall by the wayside.
They're gonna have a hell of a hard time trying to reconcile this latest bit of news where they wanted their subscribers to believe that Joshua versus Fury was not going to happen, that somehow Deontay Wilder finagled a situation that's blocking the fight.
Apparently not.
See, what you have to understand here is that, you know, this generation of fight fans are tantamount to a bunch of petulant children banging at the table for their milk and their applesauce. They have no temperance, no patience, and no understanding of these kinds of matters, yet they insist on chiming in. What you have to understand is these days, people want news fast and they want news now. Even if it's fake news.
They want a story.
Even if the story is straight out of a Mother Goose book. Even if the story is a fake story.
A made-up story.
And these made-up stories can at times, sometimes, have a tangible effect. These made-up stories cause the fight fans to start asking questions, which then in turn cause the pundits and the powers that be to start asking questions. Where are we with the fight? You know, is there a fight date? Is there a location? Are we anywhere near seeing this come into fruition? Mounting pressure was growing to get the deal done. And Eddie Hearn seems like he was feeling that pressure, because very recently he lashed out at Cash Money Coogan.
Not percentage, but telling you, this is what I do, right? You walk around with a square mic trying to interview people. I make deals. I make things happen, right? So you either trust me to do that or you don't. Is there anyone better at doing it? No. Right? So let me do my work. No one else is doing work. Just me. Right? Is Frank Warren going out there trying to land a site deal? No. Is Bob Arum out there trying to land a site? No. So it's me. And it's all on me. I'm either going to deliver it and be the saviour, or you're all going to moan at me. Give me my time, give me your support, and let me do my thing.
Why is that a big secret anyway, where the offers are coming from?
Conversations going on at the moment. So, you know, I don't really want to be telling you strictly confidential business information that, quite frankly, you have absolutely no right to know.
Rattled for the first time in this whole...
Rattled. I mean, my heart rate is just absolutely racing at the moment. I'm fuming.
1 or 2 days ago I talked about this, that I can't imagine how fucking hard it must be for Eddie Hearn to try to work in an environment like this, in this kind of a climate where you got all these guys cackling at you and hassling you when you're the only one doing the legwork.
What a pain in the ass it must be to have to work with the Furies.
I mean, could you imagine working in an environment like that? Could you imagine trying to get anything done, anything on this scale, done?
Shut up, you cunt!
Environment like that, with so many people giving you shit, giving you negativity. location to location, site to site, offer to offer. Also that Big John Fury can be sat on the couch telling you that you're not doing your job.
Hey, when's the Mickey Theo
You
fight?
talk about your overbearing fathers, right? Your helicopter parents. You'd have thought Big John Fury was the one finalizing this deal.
Right?
Big John Fury, Big Blowhard Fury, would have had the boxing community at large believe that the fight isn't possible, there's no money for it, only so that 1 or 2 days later his son could do a full 180, completely change his tune.
Oh.
Why is anybody even pointing a mic at that fucking guy?
Is he the one negotiating this fight?
The news is encouraging, though. It is. And I think we all know what needs to happen now. I mean, in between time, one is left to wonder how this affects the landscape. I think that the Wilder people are actually waiting for this fight to be announced so that they can ride that wave, coattail that news with some smaller news of their own. Deontay Wilder's ring return. I actually think that what they might be doing is waiting for Joshua versus Fury to be finalized, announced, so that they can then make their own announcement. Because Deontay Wilder, he did this for years with Anthony Joshua. That might be a big part of the reason why, there are no official announcements in reference to what Wilder's doing next yet.
That's a possibility.
I think that Team Fury, once they got a look at the kind of money that was on the table, in spite of how much bitching, moaning, peeing, crying, and shitting they've been doing the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, I think they took one good long look at how much money was on the table, and that was all it took to allay their fears. Rest assured, I think that the Furies were having a panic attack. Rest assured, I think that anxiety had a lot to do with why the Furies have been complaining so much. They've already spent over a year, Tyson has, away from the ring. They're waiting on news. He is. And neither of his two promoters are doing any fucking thing aside from interviews casting doubt on the fight. They're waiting on Eddie. You might as well have been paying Eddie Hearn to promote Tyson Fury.
Well, he's the only promoter here doing any fucking promoting.
Yet he gets the most shit. A lot of people out there have grown quite comfortable expecting the world of Eddie Hearn, expecting the world of Anthony Joshua, and expecting next to nothing of everyone else. It's usually losers that do stuff like that. I mean, it's usually guys with B-side mentalities that operate on that wavelength.
Bums.
To those people, I'd say, sit tight, princess. News will be arriving shortly.